that view. So then the question becomes, well, how did the Jake Tappers of the world miss something that most ordinary Democratic voters clearly pick up on? Let's tally this up. On one hand, everybody knew there was something off about Joe Biden, and by everyone I mean the Democratic base. And on the other hand, you had a coterie of partisan, motivated Biden world dead enders, the veritable court eunuchs in this place, and they insist that nothing was wrong with His Majesty. How dare you even ask questions? The mainstream media had no questions of their own until George Clooney got offended. Then it was okay. Look, whether we have a president of the United States who's literally fit for office should not revolve around whether George Clooney is personally offended at his lack of recognition, in my humble opinion.
Here we are again, Robbie.
Here we are again.
Decrepit Joe Biden and what is to be said about him. Look, I don't think Joe Biden was capable of serving a second term. I think that became obvious at the time of the debate. I think that's why I and lots of other people believed he should step aside after that debate. Then there's a separate question to me of whether the media conspired to keep it silent or keep it hidden. And that's the part that I'm much more skeptical of, than you. I'm skeptical of the idea that it was a media conspiracy.
The media part, the people around him
Yes.
clearly conspired to keep it quiet to a degree.
Right, and according to this book, the people around him, the particularly closest circle of the people around him, conspired to keep it quiet even from other people in the White House and other Democratic politicians.
By limiting the meetings he was taking, when you could talk to him only at the most favorable times for him. Yes.
Exactly, and pushing meetings later in the day, and later in the morning, and ending them earlier in the afternoon. So there's obviously a problem here. The issue, I think, is firstly, people tend not to accept, to my mind, that Biden's decline did clearly accelerate, I would say, in the second half of his first term. Yes, he always looked an old man. His gait had grown much stiffer. His voice had lost certainly a lot of its velocity. But I don't think until that debate you really saw the scale of the decline. And there were, in fairness to people like Jake Tapper and others in the media, there were instances where videos were deceptive. The famous one, I think, is a meeting in Europe, the G7, where it was framed as if Biden was sort of wandering off into the distance, when in fact he was waving at a parachutist.
That one, I will concede, was a little bit deceptive. I agree with you on that one, but there were like 3 of them at a row. One of them was from, I believe it was that George Clooney fundraiser, where that was one of the videos where he needed to be let off the stage by Obama. That one wasn't deceptive, and it got, it was all 3 at the same time. We're like, there's, these cheap fake videos that are being pushed for. That's what Karine Jean-Pierre said. I agree on the one. You could maybe make that claim, although she made it sound like they were manipulated in some way. They were maybe edited in an unfair way. Yeah. But I don't think media figures like Jake Tapper were in on the conspiracy. But like even what you said about what the inner circle was doing, okay, so he was taking fewer meetings. There were things they were doing, and I can't help but think that if it was a figure that the media was more nakedly hostile to, they would have been asking questions about why is our access to Biden being limited? Why it would prompt them to do some real investigative work, as we're seeing with, for instance, John Fetterman, someone the media no longer likes very much, that they can get his inner circle to publish hit piece after hit piece. So it's the lack of. It's not that they were in on the conspiracy. It seemed like there's a lack of enthusiasm to get to the truth.
But aren't you, in a sense, adapting your language depending on what outcome you want? In Fetterman's case, you're saying the disclosure is a hit piece. And in Biden's case, you're saying they didn't go to the people who would be critical of him and they were at fault there. It surely has to be one or the other. In Fetterman's case, I think it is to our benefit that we have greater information. And in Biden's case, it would have been to our benefit.
I think Fetterman was not fit to run in the first place, is what I said when he was running for the Senate, given the stroke he'd suffered. I think if a lot, throwing pens over here,
yes.
I think if a lot of the recent information is accurate and fair, then I would have serious questions about him being able to serve, absolutely. I think we should have more people leave office for reasons of obvious cognitive or physical or age-related impairment. I'm more of a throw them all out, get in new people. They're not entitled to these seats. The way our politicians act like they deserve to be in power forever, when when you wouldn't hire them to run some of these people who are so beyond their actual capacity. You wouldn't hire them to be grocery store checkout people, and yet they're entitled to this position.
You know, as I reiterate, I think that the book, Tapper's book, is called Original Sin, Tapper and Thompson's book, and the original sin, which I agree was the original problem, was Joe Biden deciding to run for a second term. Yeah. He could have been the transitional president and not done that. Now, where I think it becomes cloudier is his team to this day say there isn't, where is the evidence of his decision making being affected by cognitive impairment? There are lots of his decisions that I think were bad decisions, particularly, not to get back into the Israel-Gaza thing again, but I think his conduct there was catastrophic. But I don't think it was caused by cognitive decline, and that's, I think, a valid point.
Well, there is that, but I think when you're out of it in the way that he was, you're less likely to, or just more reliant on, your advisors and just the government to continue functioning by the bureaucrats who are in charge of things, which some people might ideologically think is a good thing. I tend to not think that, especially when it comes to foreign policy, where I want the democratically elected head of the government making the foreign policy decisions, not the same sort of, neoconservative in both parties, permanent foreign policy experts. Trump right now is doing a lot of things in the Middle East that I think are good, and I think you have at least some appreciation for, that I think stems from his own unique ideas or some of the ideas of the people he's brought in, that if you have someone who doesn't have like a vision and a drive to do something different, then you would never, I don't think you would have gotten any of these results under Biden, is what I'm saying.
I think we will be returning to Mr. Trump in the Middle East shortly.
Yes, we will, because the President Trump, actually called a former jihadist an attractive man. But it's a lot more complicated than that. We'll tell you why. Stay tuned.